Located somewhere at the crossroads of spirituality and the supernatural, heaven and hell, faith and fear, this is the Salvation Report.
Salvation.
And now, here is your host, world-renowned author and researcher, Robert Stanley.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Salvation Report. I am your holy host, Robert Stanley, broadcasting from sunny southern Florida on December 29th, 2025, with a special report about the evil empire on Earth. Why do we need to discuss this again? Because it still exists. And, this is just something that it's temporary. The fallen angels are imprisoned here, and they're being dealt with. But it's a difficult time that we're in, and specifically, the so-called leadership is captured. Those who allegedly represent us, all the way up to presidents and beyond, whoever's really behind the scenes, they are corrupt, to say the least. They are complicit. They are collaborators, or they could be directly related. And that's one of the things I wanted to share with you here about these key players. I'm not the first one to bring this up. I probably won't be the last, but there are people among us who are not exactly human the way we think of ourselves, the way we relate to ourselves. I'm talking about genetically and spiritually. So it's not just a contest between good and evil. There's biblically, it talks about the seed of Satan versus God's seed. And ultimately, God's seed is going to triumph over Satan's seed. Satan meaning the adversary. That's what it translates to. Okay, I know I've said that a million times, but some people haven't got the memo yet. Anyway, the bottom line is this. The rich and powerful on this world are heavily compromised. I'm sure some of them had maybe started off with the best of intentions, but ultimately they all are, they're pawns. They're just pawns. So specifically what I wanted to show you in this particular report is a massive data dump on Jeffrey Epstein. He was not self-made at all. He was just an errand boy for what some people call globalists. But more importantly, I'm going to argue, and I haven't heard anybody else bring this particular perspective out publicly, so I'm going to do it, is I'm going to argue that he is not fully human. And yes, he's still alive, in my opinion. Why would I say that? Well, obviously, the camera footage that they showed us was fake. Some of the other footage, I believe, or images that they showed us, very easily faked. And he was just an asset. And it's very easy for them the powers that be, to fake a death. For example, Hitler. He clearly survived. He didn't shoot himself in the head. He didn't commit suicide. Neither did Jeffrey Epstein. And just below this video report are links to information that, if you haven't seen it before, I think you'll find quite shocking. I've been on the fence for many years about this. Did JFK fake his death? I mean, more importantly, how could anybody do that? Well, first of all, you have to have the motive. And then secondly, you'd have to have the means. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Well, there was a reason that dozens of people were killed after the so-called assassination. And I personally believe it's because that they were They knew something that couldn't be disclosed. The same thing is true for the moon landing of Apollo, landings, missions, whatever. There's a lot of things on this planet that only if you place it in the context, and I've said this again way too many times, but for me anyway, unless you place this in the context of the war in heaven, and we're dealing with an adversary or adversaries of God, one of them in particular who's in charge, he gets many different names or titles, one of them being the father of lies, a murderer from the beginning, a fallen angel who started an insurrection, a rebellion, a family feud, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, really, man, this is difficult for me to talk about. The information in the files below, and you will have to download them and read them. Some of those links are going to disappear. I'm sure of it, because that's just what happens. But I have put together over a series of months, literally months, working on this, collecting and curating all the information that's available about Epstein and his affiliates, the deep state, the real deep state. It's not just in America, it's a global thing. It is the fallen angels, it is the Luciferians, it is their offspring, the Nephilim or Nephilim, however you want to say it. That's who we're talking about here. Unfortunately, they're still here. They're still doing their dirty deeds. Okay, so when most people are focused on Epstein as being a pervert involved in sex trafficking of young women, it's much, much deeper than that. There was drugs, there was weapons, there was money laundering, but more importantly, there was genetic experiments going on, and even more importantly, from what I understand, is that crew of people were directly involved in impregnating women that they selected for their genetics. For example, I need to be more specific. Let's say there's a billionaire that wants to extend his life. What was being offered there through Zorro Ranch, probably other facilities as well, the sperm from that billionaire, would be impregnating a woman who would then have the child aborted and harvested. And those, it's not adrenochrome here. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the stem cells from that child would not be rejected, but when it was injected into the billionaire who initiated the process and paid for this life extension. It's totally immoral. It is illegal. It should be. I mean, as far as I know, it still is. But that was one aspect. And the reason I bring that up is because in Genesis, it talks about how the fallen angels took women, the daughters of men, and had children, which were allegedly giants. But actually, the word Nephilim translates to fallen ones. Yes, there was giants on the earth. That is also in the Bible. There literally were giants. Some of them had 6 fingers and 6 toes. But this indicates genetic manipulation. They didn't create the DNA. They didn't create any of this universe, but they can manipulate genetically modified organisms. They've been doing it. They have the technology. They've been doing it for a very long time, relatively speaking. And that's why Bill Gates was involved. And that's why Epstein was so involved with all these different scientists that doing these different studies, paying them outrageous amounts of money to come and to these facilities. So One of the survivors, the victims, did this drawing. It's very crude, obviously. I believe, and I think this was Zorro Ranch. Now, if any of you are familiar with alien abductions, that's very similar, very, very similar, because it's the same thing. Most of the women who claim to have been abducted and then become pregnant or impregnated, and then their child, the pregnancy is aborted by the same people that got her pregnant. These so-called aliens, it just means foreigner. That's all it means, not human. They took the child for what? Well, supposedly to create hybrids. Yes, you can do that. Like I said, I would argue that's in Genesis 6:4. That's what they were doing. We assume that they were having intercourse with the women, but that's not necessarily the case. Especially when you read the books of Enoch. You can see that they had the fallen angels had a relationship with us that was very one-sided. These were fallen angels, by the way, not just regular angels that just showed up and were watching over us. That's a huge misunderstanding of the relationship. So what other kind of creatures could these fallen angels be making using our human DNA? This is from one of the other survivors, victims of Epstein's, claiming that this is what he looked like to her when they were having sex. Now, I'm very skeptical about a lot of things because it's very difficult to prove, if not impossible. So I'm highly skeptical of claims of reptilians. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it's such a gray area. However, does that mean it's impossible? No, it just means I can't prove it. Other people are adamant that that this is the case. Now, I can't explain it. Obviously, I'm just bringing it up. This actually makes a lot of sense, because some of the sworn testimony of the so-called victims said that Mr. Epstein's manhood was quite unusual, noticeably unusual compared to a normal man. And I'm not talking about the size, it's just the shape of it was very bizarre. That is also in the book of Enoch, that these fallen angels definitely had animalistic looking private parts. And did they use them for procreation? Probably, but that doesn't mean that there's a direct compatibility. I think most of this is done in a laboratory because we know that can happen. We know for a fact now, we can prove that that's the case. Back in in the old times, people didn't even know what that meant. I'll tell you something else. I've said it before. Again, I'm repeating myself a lot, but you never know who's watching, especially new people coming to my research these days. Allegedly, in Sumerian, or the ancient language of the Anunnaki, which just means angels, the word serpent is synonymous with scientist. So when the serpent came into the garden, we're not talking about a snake. We're talking about a man who is a scientist, who is a geneticist, who is a genetic manipulator of DNA and genomes, So please bear that in mind when we're talking about what's going on here with these entities. I think soulless entities, in the sense that they are a shell. They don't really have the spark of the divine spark. It's a bit of a monstrosity, a golem, I think, is some call it. Anyway, the bottom line is this: I am convinced And that's why I'm reporting it here, that if you read through the documents that I'm providing down below this report on my Substack, robertstanley.substack.com. So if you're somewhere else like YouTube, Spotify, something, I don't know where it may be, for sure. But if you're not on my Substack, you won't be able to link to the reports. So these are available as Word documents or PDFs. I'll give you an example. Okay. So when you read through this, if you take the time to do that, don't be intimidated by the size of the files. Doesn't mean anything. It's whatever jumps out at you, whatever speaks to you, and educates you about this particular subject matter that I'm reporting to you. Hopefully it makes sense, or at least makes a difference in your perspective of what is this all about? Well, as I said, it's a war between good and evil, a conflict, a cosmic conflict that started eons ago. It didn't start here, but it's going to end here. That's why there's so much going on this planet with these entities, excuse me, who are, in my opinion, running out of time. I'm not sure why God gave them this much time at all, except to, actually, so wait a minute. It was explained to me that God is demonstrating something to all of creation, meaning all of the other inhabited worlds, all the angels that he created prior to us are watching this unfold. So it is significant. It really is. And it's timeless too, because all of this is being recorded. And no, I don't mean YouTube. I'm talking about, some people loosely call it the Akashic Records. I don't know. I doubt that's what it's really called, but if I had to describe it, I would say it's a holographic record of everything that ever happened and everything that will ever happen. It's all recorded, because why wouldn't God do that? That's just, we're created in his image. So obviously, we're emulating things that he already has been doing for a long time before he created us. So this is all going to be resolved. But in the meantime, we're suffering through it here on this world. And it is obviously very traumatic. So, and it's very difficult to comprehend exactly what's going on. Let me give you an example. So this is when he was arrested in Florida, where I live, not far from where I live, actually, in Palm Beach County. And, he has a history of doing all kinds of things for the deep state. And this is why, when he was arrested here in Florida, someone in the government who is now on Trump's administration said at the time, we got to let him go. Because he's an asset. Asset for whom? Well, he worked for the CIA, he worked for the Mossad, and he worked, I think he's still working for MI6. And again, he didn't just come out of nowhere. He's a construct. His predecessors were people like Roy Cohn and J. Edgar Hoover. And they were doing essentially the same thing, slightly different variation, but it's the same thing. Blackmail, human trafficking, money laundering, all of that stuff. So there are people in the government, so-called deep state, that are criminals. They're career criminals. And the reason they can get away with it is because they're being protected by the system, which is corrupt. From the very beginning, actually, if you think about it, we were corrupted. Our whole system has been corrupted by these fallen angels. Why? Because the God of this world is Satan. Let me put it another way. The Lord of this world, the ruler of this world, is Satan. And that's why he tempted Jesus and said, if you bow down before me, all of this can be yours. What kind of deal is that? that's just so stupid. But whatever, from his perspective, from Satan, Lucifer, whatever you want to call him, the guy's got so many titles I can't keep up with it. But the bottom line is, he feels he owns this world, allegedly, because this was he was, prior to the first destruction, and then us showing up, God creating us, and then the fall, and then the flood, and it's just been a lot of stuff that's happened on this world, most of which has been hidden from us because we don't need to know all the details. It's really not important. What we need to know is who we really are, who our creator is, and how we can have a loving relationship with him. To keep his commandments is essential, because that demonstrates to the rest of creation that God is loving, is just, and that his accuser, his adversary, is a liar, is a murderer, and is unrepentant, and therefore deserves whatever punishment that comes in the future. I mean, he's already been punished more than once, but apparently he simply refuses to repent. And those who serve him are suffering as well, but they don't know, or they're scared. I believe that a lot of them are just too scared to break away and stop serving their master, this father of lies. Because that's how he rules, is through intimidation. And the same thing was true with Epstein. He was controlling people. Actually, his handlers had him doing their bidding, so that every politician and judge and pretty much everyone who's anyone in this world in a position of authority is compromised, so that they can be controlled and secretly do the bidding of these fallen angels, cosmic criminals. I mean, I don't know what insurrectionists. The really sad part is that they're our family too. And this is a family feud. And in my opinion, it's been going on for far too long. So again, I've putting together these files over the last, I don't know, 5-6 months it's annoying to me. But I think that there is a purpose to this, in the sense that we really need to know what we're dealing with. And so far, I haven't seen anybody bring up the fact, I mean, other than this briefly, this came up and it was immediately dismissed as just nonsense. Some woman, she must have been on drugs or traumatized or what. Yeah, sure, that all of those things, but that doesn't mean none of that happened. She also said she saw UFOs over the ranch in the Zorro Ranch in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. I'm telling you that I see this holistically, all right? There is a connection. There really is. It's just that most of us don't see it, or we don't want to see it. So if you're not interested, fine, I get it. But if you are, that's what this report is for. You can dive as deep as you want. There's multiple documents that have hundreds of links for you to follow, so that you understand who these players are and what is their agenda. It hasn't really changed. It hasn't. Since we showed up here. Remember, our allegedly Adam and Eve were seduced by a serpent, a scientist, a Nakash, a shining one. That's the other translation of the word Nakash. A beguiling serpent. Let me say it again. A beguiling scientist. Have you ever seen one of those? Oh, yes. Anthony Fauci. Trust the science. Safe and effective. No, it's not. Those are lies. The scientists have no moral compunction. There's a word for them. I'm tripping over it. Compulsion. They're not compelled. They don't. That's not part of. That's not a requirement. You would think. I was really shocked the other day. I heard Dr. Lee Merritt was talking about the Hippocratic Oath. They swear their allegiance to the Greek gods, Apollo. They are not. It's an assumption on our part that they supposedly will do no harm. Obviously, they do, and for profit. Or they may be simply forced into it. They're intimidated, threatened. We'll take your license away if you don't do what we say. All right, well. So this is the kind of nonsense that goes on behind the scenes on the evil empire here on Earth. And I personally don't think that we can stop it. I believe only God can stop it and will stop it when he feels it's time. But until that time, I think it's incumbent upon us to actually do our best to be aware of it so we don't get harmed by it. That was actually the name of one of the fallen angels, Harmony. It's also known as sorry, I'm blanking. It's where we get the word pharmacy from. Pharmakia, pharmeros. That's the Greek pronunciation is pharmeros. The more Semitic version is harmony. And he's the one that gave us drugs. Not just any drugs. Drugs that would obviously make us more easily manipulated and or sick. So it's not the system is satanic, meaning adversarial towards God. God gave us a natural and innate immune system so that we could survive here on this toxic planet. Because that's what it is. It wasn't always, but that's what it's become. So the pharmaceutical industry is actually, you should call it what it is. It's satanic science given to us by fallen angels. And I'm sure some people are like, wait a minute, Robert, there's no such thing as fallen angels. Really? Really? Are you sure about that? Because historically, there's a lot of documented evidence that they do, not only do they exist, but they're imprisoned here and they've been manipulating us from sometimes overtly, but for sure covertly for thousands of years. And it's going to stop. And I do think that, it'll probably stop sooner if the more of us just wake up and say, no, we have free will. I never gave you permission to do those things. They tricked us into believing we had to, this latest round of gene therapy, which is not therapy at all. It's genetic manipulation or genetic modification. And it's, it's been designated as a bioweapon. It killed my dad, my biological father. Killed him slowly, and it's killed millions of people. So here, this is how they're doing it. All right, they rigged the system so that we're all in debt to them financially. They do life extension, and we get our lives shortened by their medical system, the allopathic medical system, there's some things that are good about it, and I'm grateful that they saved my wife's life physically, but the system actually made her sick as well. The stress, alcohol lowered her immunity so that the what do I call carcinogens that she was exposed to at work ultimately is how she contracted cancer. And so many people have too. I mean, especially now with, look, this will probably get pulled somewhere, but the bottom line is it's already been reported. The so-called, I'm trying to think of the word we can use, the jabs for this alleged pandemic contained cancer viruses and also a lot of DNA. So that shouldn't have been there, which is it causes all kinds of issues, all kinds of health complications, and this is done by design. So I'm trying to give you an overall picture here. The details I should say, the devil is in the details. In the reports that I provide for you down below this report, there's documents with more than enough information to help you understand who and what Jeffrey Epstein really is and who he worked for and what was their agenda, or what is their agenda, because it's ongoing. It hasn't stopped. That's one of the reasons that they're so hesitant to release the files, because so many people were involved in this, or still are involved, and they've been compromised. And so these so-called public servants and public defenders, or whatever you call them, judiciaries, the legal system is totally compromised. So is the financial system. So is the medical system. So. It's just like, and I just not happy to be sharing this with you, because it's very unpleasant. I wish this wasn't the case, but it's not up to me. I can't just wish it away. So it's better that we deal with it in whatever capacity that we can. Part of it is exposing it and then opposing it. Do not participate. Publicly denounce these entities for who and what they are. They're satanic. They're adversarial towards God. And why do they hate us? Obviously, because we were created in the image of God for a reason. Okay. This was not an experiment. God knew we were going to fall, but it serves a purpose. It all serves his purpose, which is to prove his adversary is a liar and a murderer, and that God is honest and just and loving. And then he provided a redemption plan for us, or actually anyone. I'm not so sure about the fallen angels at this point. I don't know. I can't say. I'm only human, so I just focus on that. But anybody who has followed my research over the years realizes at this point, you could see that I've evolved because of my relationship with God. And it's not religious. It's spiritual. And I'm grateful. But I'll be the first one to admit, I'm confounded, and that's putting it nicely. Sometimes a lot of times I'm absolutely baffled by the way God works. And some people say, oh, well, God, everybody knows God works in mysterious ways. Only if you don't ask. If you don't ask in prayer, Father, please forgive me for my ignorance and also my behavior, my prideful behavior, my stiff neck, my hardened heart. Please show me what it is that you're doing and why. That's not so hard, is it? Well, yeah, actually it is. If you're very egotistical, as I have been in the past, it's It's like any other relationship, okay? If you're dealing with somebody that's egotistical, they're not going to hear you. They're not going to feel you because they're so busy being them, you know, and thinking that they got it all figured out. So again, I really feel like I know we we need to have a healthy, loving relationship with God on his own terms, but we have to choose it. God does not force himself on us in that regard. That's the way he set it up. I'm sure there's a reason for that. And I mean, it just makes sense, right? I can't force my wife to love me. It's not how it works, you know? Uh, I hope that she does. I hope there's some reciprocity there. When I say, hey, I love you and I care for you and I demonstrate that, and then, you know, hopefully that she will do the same. And that's how God is with us. I will also just say, though, that I've heard some people over the Christmas season here talking about God being unconditional love. If there were no conditions, if there was no rules, that's not love. You can't raise children like that. You can't just let them do whatever they want. They're going to get hurt or they're going to hurt other people or both. So there are conditions. It's in the Bible. It's commandments, statutes, ordinances, laws. I mean, you know, rules. Those are rules. And when we break the rules, we end up suffering the consequences for it. And it's not because God hates us. It just, he really, my understanding is that he does suffer when we do foolish things like that, especially when we fall for the tricks, the lies of the adversary and all his minions. And again, this is the only reason I decided to go ahead and dump this information about Jeffrey Epstein and all the other people who are involved in this. Yes, and that includes Donald John Trump. You don't get to be rich and famous like that, especially in New York, running around in those elite circles without bumping up against the dark side. You know, I don't know how compromised he is. I'm just saying. He definitely has some very questionable relationships with people who we know for a fact are compromised and or criminals, have committed criminal acts. And that specifically, I'm thinking of Roy Cohn, who said that some people call him the mentor of Donald Trump when he was younger, because that's Roy Cohn's passed now, but he was very prominent in New York and elsewhere and worked with the FBI doing these blackmail operations. And it's just, man. So, and that's why I started off with JFK. A lot of people, and I was one of them for a long time, thought that, you know, JFK was a really great person. And unfortunately, he's not. His family is part of that whole Illuminati, satanic Nephilim, the fallen ones. Clearly, I mean, Joe Kennedy was a criminal, but he rose up through the ranks. He was a ambassador, I believe, to Britain, who they've been pulling the strings for a long time. Okay. I mean, yeah, on paper, we've broken free. America is supposedly independent. Not really. Not really. That's not how it works. It's all about enslavement to the system. And the system is satanic. You know, there would be no need for life extension using those techniques that I described, among others, if we were still fully connected to God. If you remember, Adam and his offspring, how long did they live? Hundreds of years. But they gradually declined. Because why? Because their connection, their relationship with God was diminishing over time. So their lifespan was diminishing. And you can't fix that with science. It's a spiritual matter. It's a relationship. It's energetic, yes, but it's spiritual at its core. I mean, energy doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's coming from God. Its vibrations coming from God. So, yeah. Okay. I don't know why I always feel like I'm preaching to you guys. It's just, I'm really sharing from my heart, but it's just part of me is just frustrated. That's what I feel. Very frustrated with the situation. I wish it would just be over, but again, it's not up to me. So I'm limited in what I can do while I'm here. And obviously I want to be of service to God. Hopefully this isn't the only thing I can do, is these reports. And anyway, that concludes another salvation report. Until next time, may God bless you always and in all ways. Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. Here comes God's Son, and I say, it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since he's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. Here comes God's Son, and I say, it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since he's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes God's Son, and I say, it's alright. Sun, 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 here he comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since he's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes God's Son, and I say, it's alright. It's alright.